When you hear that someone has lived to the age of 117, it almost sounds like a legend. Most of us can barely imagine reaching 90 or 100, let alone adding nearly 2 more decades beyond that. Yet that is the story of Nabi Tajima, a Japanese woman born in 1900, who lived through the entire 20th century and well into the 21st, making her one of the longest-lived people in recorded history. She saw more than a century of history unfold, from the era of horse-drawn carriages to the age of smartphones. When she passed away in 2018, she had lived an incredible 117 years, becoming a symbol of resilience and wisdom. Her story matters because it teaches us something profound about longevity. So often, people look for the secret to long life in miracle foods, expensive treatments, or complicated routines. But sometimes, the answer is not just in what people did but in what they never did. Nabi Tajima's life highlights how avoiding harmful patterns can be just as important, if not more, than adding new habits. She represents the idea that sometimes the absence of certain behaviors allows the body to thrive far longer than expected. Modern science strongly supports this. Researchers who study centenarians and supercentenarians, those who live beyond 110, often find that the difference between long-lived individuals and those with shorter lifespans is not only genetics but also lifestyle. Avoiding certain risks, such as smoking, chronic overeating, or social isolation, protects the body from accelerated aging. Think of it as a balance scale. Every good habit adds weight to health, and every harmful habit subtracts from it. By keeping her life free of certain negative influences, Nabi allowed her scale to remain steady for over a century. Another reason her story is inspiring is because it feels relatable. Not everyone can afford advanced health programs or access cutting-edge medicine, but almost anyone can choose to avoid harmful behaviors. Nabi lived a simple, ordinary life in Kikai, a small island in Kagoshima Prefecture, Japan. She wasn't a scientist or a celebrity. She didn't build her longevity around wealth or privilege. Instead, her long life unfolded in the context of modest daily choices and cultural traditions. That makes her story accessible to everyone, because if she could do it, so can we. Let's bring this into a modern, everyday example. Imagine 2 people in their 50s. The first person thinks, "I've earned the right to enjoy myself however I want," and so they smoke, drink heavily, eat processed foods daily, and avoid exercise. The second person doesn't follow a perfect health routine, but they avoid smoking, they eat simple meals, and they stay connected to friends and family. At first, the difference doesn't look dramatic. Both are still working, still able to go about their daily lives. But fast forward a few decades. The first person may be struggling with chronic illnesses, weakened lungs, and poor mobility, while the second person remains independent, clear-minded, and capable of enjoying old age. The choice to avoid harm makes all the difference. Nabi's life illustrates that perfectly. Science calls this the subtraction effect. Instead of always asking, "What can I add to improve my health?" we can also ask, "What can I subtract that harms me?" Just as cleaning a room is often about removing clutter, extending life is often about removing damaging behaviors. Nabi never smoked. She never indulged in modern processed foods the way many people do today. She never gave in to the loneliness that isolates so many older adults. By never letting these negative influences dominate her life, she gave her body and mind the chance to endure. This perspective is powerful because it is hopeful. You don't need to be perfect to live longer. You don't need to follow a flawless routine or spend money on complicated treatments. Sometimes, the most powerful decision is simply to avoid the things that shorten life. It is about saying no to what weakens you so you can say yes to the decades ahead. Nabi Tajima's life story invites us to rethink the way we approach aging. Instead of searching for endless additions, we can look at the habits we already have and ask, which of these might be taking years away from me? Her example reminds us that longevity is not about chasing after new and shiny solutions. It is about wisdom, restraint, and the power of choosing what not to do. As we move into the next part of this journey, we will explore the first thing Nabi Tajima never did, something that has shortened millions of lives but never had a place in hers. By understanding her choices, we can begin to see how avoiding just one destructive habit can add not only years to life but life to years. The first thing Nabi Tajima never did in her 117 years of life was smoke or use addictive substances. At first glance, this might not sound like a great revelation, but when you look at the global impact of smoking, alcohol abuse, and other harmful habits, you begin to see just how powerful her choice was. In fact, avoiding these substances may have been one of the single greatest reasons her body endured for more than a century. Nabi was born in 1900 in Kagoshima Prefecture, Japan, during a time when tobacco was spreading worldwide. By the early 20th century, smoking was not only common but celebrated in advertising. For men in particular, smoking became a social norm, and many women, too, adopted it over time. Yet despite the cultural pressure, Nabi Tajima never smoked. She also avoided alcohol abuse, which is another habit that can slowly destroy the body from within. Science is crystal clear on this point. Smoking shortens life expectancy by at least 10 years, sometimes more. It damages nearly every organ in the body, from the lungs and heart to the skin and bones. Heavy drinking contributes to liver disease, cancer, and weakened immunity. But here is the hopeful part. People who never start smoking, or who quit early in life, can often regain nearly all the years that smoking would have taken from them. In Nabi's case, her lifelong avoidance of tobacco and alcohol meant her body never had to repair that damage in the first place. Think of the lungs as a filter. When someone smokes every day, the filter clogs with tar and toxins, losing its ability to do its job. Breathing becomes harder, oxygen flow decreases, and the entire body suffers. By never smoking, Nabi kept her filters clean. Her lungs, heart, and blood vessels remained strong enough to support her for over a century. This one choice gave her body an enormous advantage over those who damaged themselves daily with cigarettes or heavy alcohol. But it wasn't just about health risks. Avoiding addictive substances also meant avoiding dependency. Many people who smoke or drink heavily spend their lives planning around these habits, sometimes sacrificing relationships, finances, or peace of mind. Nabi, on the other hand, lived free of that burden. She could focus on her family, her community, and her daily routines without being tied to an addiction. That freedom was not only physical, it was emotional. To see how important this is, imagine two women of the same age. The first smoked for decades. By the time she is in her 70s, she struggles with shortness of breath, persistent coughs, and frequent hospital visits. The second, like Nabi, never smoked. By her 70s, she is still walking comfortably, still able to spend time with her grandchildren, still enjoying her independence. The difference is not luck, it is choice. Nabi's decision to never smoke or abuse alcohol set her on the second path, the path of independence and resilience. And her example is particularly powerful because she lived in a culture where smoking was common. In Japan, as in many parts of the world, tobacco was widely available and socially accepted throughout much of her lifetime. Yet she chose a different path. Her restraint, combined with the traditional lifestyle of her community, became one of her greatest strengths. This should be an encouragement for anyone today who feels it might be too late. If you smoke or drink heavily, you might think the damage is already done. But research shows that quitting smoking at any age improves health. Even someone in their 60s or 70s who gives up smoking can add years of life expectancy and improve their quality of life. Avoiding these substances from the start, as Nabi did, is best. But it is never too late to choose differently. When we look at the extraordinary length of her life, it is clear that Nabi's first never was more than just a personal preference. It was a life-preserving decision. By never smoking, never abusing alcohol, and never giving in to destructive substances, she gave her body the chance to do what it was designed to do, keep going. She preserved her lungs, her heart, her brain, and her independence. So the first lesson from her 117 years is simple. You don't need to add anything fancy to extend your life. Sometimes the best decision is about what you avoid. By saying no to smoking and harmful substances, you're really saying yes to more years, more freedom, and more strength. As we move forward, we'll look at the second thing Nabi Tajima never did, something equally powerful and perhaps even more relevant to our modern world. She never fell into the trap of overindulgence in processed and unhealthy foods. Her traditional Japanese diet became not only a cultural treasure but a key ingredient in her remarkable longevity. The second thing Nabi Tajima never did in her 117 years was fall into the trap of overindulging in processed and unhealthy foods. This may sound simple, but in today's world, where fast food chains on every corner and packaged snacks fill our homes, it is one of the most important lessons she leaves behind. Born in 1900 on Kikai Island, in Japan's Kagoshima Prefecture, Nabi grew up in a world where food was simple, seasonal, and locally prepared. She never relied on packaged meals, artificial flavors, or heavily processed products. Instead, her diet reflected the traditional Japanese style of eating: rice, fish, vegetables, seaweed, miso soup, tofu, and green tea. Protein often came from fish or beans, while meals were rounded out with vegetables and grains. Even sweets were natural and modest, like small pieces of fruit or traditional Japanese wagashi made with red bean paste. This diet provided her with exactly what modern science now confirms as the foundation of longevity. High in plant-based nutrients, low in saturated fats, and full of fiber, the traditional Japanese diet helps regulate blood sugar, reduce inflammation, and protect against heart disease and diabetes. For Nabi, this was not a diet in the trendy sense. It was simply the way people ate. Contrast this with the modern eating habits that have become common across much of the world. Fast food, fried snacks, sugary drinks, and oversized portions dominate many tables. These foods may taste satisfying in the moment, but over decades they strain the body. Obesity, diabetes, heart disease, and even cognitive decline are strongly linked to diets heavy in processed food. Nabi's life was a rejection of that culture, not through resistance, but through the simple reality of her environment and habits. She never gave in to processed indulgence because it was never part of her way of life. Science calls this nutritional environment, the food landscape around you that shapes your choices. Nabi's environment, rooted in Japanese traditions, shielded her from the temptations of processed eating. But her story also offers hope. Even if modern environments make it harder, individuals can still choose simpler, whole foods. Every time we choose an apple instead of chips, fish instead of fried meat, or water instead of soda, we are moving closer to the lifestyle that sustained her for 117 years. To make this more relatable, imagine two men in their 40s. One frequently eats fast food, burgers, fries, sodas, and sweets. The other eats rice, vegetables, fish, and tea. At first, they may look similar in health, but as they enter their 60s and 70s, the differences grow. The first man develops diabetes and heart problems, while the second remains active, slim, and mentally sharp. By their 80s, the first may struggle with chronic illness, while the second is still enjoying time with family. Multiply this effect over 117 years, and you begin to see why Nabi's choices mattered so much. Another key principle in her diet was moderation. Japanese culture values smaller portions and balanced meals. Nabi never ate to the point of being overly full. Instead, she followed a natural rhythm of eating that left her satisfied but light. This is very similar to the Okinawan tradition of hara hachibu, or eating until you are 80% full. By never overindulging, she kept her digestion steady and her metabolism balanced, avoiding the strain that overeating places on the body. It's important to note that Nabi didn't think of her food as health food. For her, it was simply food, delicious, nourishing, and shared with others. Meals were moments of connection and culture, not chores or diets. That joyful relationship with food may have helped her avoid the cycle of guilt and restriction that so many people fall into today. The lesson is clear. What you choose not to eat is just as important as what you do eat. By never overindulging in processed, artificial, or oversized meals, Nabi preserved her health and gave her body the chance to function smoothly for more than a century. This doesn't mean you can never enjoy a treat. What it means is that treats should remain occasional, not daily habits. Just as Nabi's simple meals added up over decades, so too do the choices we make today. Every small decision, to eat fresh vegetables, to cook at home, to stop before overeating, is an investment in the years ahead. Nabi's second never is a reminder that food can either shorten life or extend it. The choice belongs to us. By following her example, you don't need exotic supplements or expensive diets. You just need to eat like your great-grandparents did, simply, modestly, and naturally. As we move into the final part of her story, we'll look at the third thing Nabi Tajima never did. Beyond food and substances, it's about her spirit. She never allowed herself to become isolated, purposeless, or cut off from family and community. That decision, as we will see, may have been just as important as her diet or habits for carrying her all the way to 117. The third thing Nabi Tajima never did was allow herself to become isolated or purposeless. In a world where loneliness has become a hidden epidemic, especially among seniors, her life offers one of the most powerful lessons for healthy aging. Connection and purpose are just as vital as food and movement. Nabi spent her entire life in Japan, in a cultural context where family and community ties were strong. She married, raised a large family, and lived long enough to meet great-great-great-grandchildren. In fact, at the time of her passing, she had more than 160 descendants, an enormous network of children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and beyond. This meant she was never truly alone. Her days were filled with visits, conversations, laughter, and the comfort of knowing she was surrounded by loved ones. She never cut herself off from family, nor did she allow age to isolate her. Science now tells us that social connection is as critical to longevity as diet or exercise. Studies show that loneliness can increase the risk of early death as much as smoking or obesity. Being socially isolated weakens the immune system, raises blood pressure, and increases the likelihood of depression and cognitive decline. By contrast, people who stay connected, who belong to families, communities, or circles of friends, enjoy longer and healthier lives. Nabi's life illustrates this truth beautifully. Another key to her longevity was that she never gave up her sense of purpose. Even in her later years, when her body grew frail, she still felt that her presence mattered. For her family, she was not only an elder but a living bridge between generations. Her memories carried the history of over a century, and her wisdom offered guidance to younger relatives. This sense of purpose gave her life meaning, which in turn gave her mind and body strength. To see the importance of this, imagine two older adults in their 80s. One spends most of the day alone, with little contact, few responsibilities, and no sense of being needed. The other lives near family, tells stories to grandchildren, helps prepare meals, or even just greets neighbors daily. The first may feel invisible and fade faster, while the second continues to thrive, fueled by purpose and connection. Nabi clearly belonged to the second group, and it carried her well past 100 into her 117th year. It is also worth noting that she lived with gratitude and acceptance. Reports from her later life describe her as gentle and calm, even after living through wars, hardship, and the loss of many loved ones. She never allowed bitterness to consume her. Instead, she embraced the present moment and valued the gift of another day. That mindset, combined with her strong social ties, kept her spirit alive as her body aged. In today's fast-paced, individualistic societies, Nabi's life is a reminder that no one is meant to live in isolation. Independence is important, but so is interdependence, the sense of belonging to something larger than yourself. She never withdrew into loneliness, and that decision was as critical to her survival as the food she ate or the habits she avoided. This should encourage anyone who feels that aging means losing relevance. Nabi proves the opposite. Even at 117, she was cherished, surrounded, and celebrated. Her example shows that life does not stop being meaningful at 70, 80, or 90. With family, friends, or community, there is always purpose to be found. So when we step back and look at the three things Nabi Tajima never did, we see a powerful pattern. She never smoked or abused substances. She never overindulged in processed foods. And she never allowed herself to be isolated or without purpose. Each of these nevers removed a major obstacle to longevity. By avoiding them, she gave her body and spirit the chance to keep going year after year, decade after decade, until she became one of the longest-lived people in history. Her story is inspiring not just because she reached 117, but because her lessons are practical for all of us. You don't need to buy expensive supplements or chase secret formulas. You can simply choose to avoid the habits that steal years away. Say no to smoking. Say no to chronic overindulgence. Say no to isolation. In doing so, you are really saying yes to more energy, more freedom, and more time with the people you love. As Nabi's life reminds us, longevity is not only about adding things to your routine, but also about subtracting the things that harm you. And perhaps most importantly, it is about living with gratitude, connection, and purpose until your very last day.